Welcome to Art Talk, the place where we agree to disagree if there's a need to. My guest today is Kate Jones from the UK. Our topic, service. Hello, Kate. How are you?
Hi, I'm good today, thank you.
I'm so pleased that we've been knowing each other for a number of years. I just realized that for 2.5 years we were in the same working group,
Indeed.
even before Corona that was, and we met once a month online with a huge group internationally.
We did indeed. Yes. I feel like I've known you for a long time.
Yeah, and of course, Kate, for those who don't know Kate, she's been around in the Reiki scene and very visibly so, particularly in the UK, but internationally for many, many years. Looking at your biography, Kate, I realized that you're actually a Reiki master 1 year senior to me. I believe you came, you finished your training as a Reiki teacher, Reiki master in 1991, right?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. So, in the spirit of just for today, I honor my elders, I honor you.
Thank you.
And I want to use the opportunity to get to know you a little bit, maybe on topics we haven't explored together, and we've agreed to speak on service. I'd like to introduce you to my audience for a moment. In her biography, Kate mentions the Reiki Association, National Occupational Standards Group for Professional Practitioners, the Regulatory Working Group, the Reiki Council, the Alliance, and many more. It is a rich life of service to organizations and working groups. Elsewhere, she summarizes, I love helping people to rediscover their well-being, joy, and vitality. I offer compassionate support for positive change through the natural methods of Reiki and nutrition. I work to assist people in reducing stress and emotional pain, to restore their balance, and so rediscover the joy of life. Most of all, I love to teach people so that they can help themselves and thereby make a greater contribution to our world. Oh, did I mention she studied literature, philosophy, and theater in Paris, whatever that means. In her early days, when she even had her own theater company, and she was focusing on folk tales from around the world. Kate, is this a fair summary, or have I overlooked?
I think that's a fair summary.
So you must have been curious, this Paris stint of yours. You must have been in your 20s, I assume.
I was, yes. It was way back in 1984, 83, 84. So, yes, I was in my 20s. I went to Paris just after university, after my degree, and studied for 2 years there with Jacques Lecoq, Monica Pagneux, and Philippe Gaulier in physical theatre.
And which included also pantomime, I believe.
Exactly, yes. And I became, it was part of my training as a clown, which is another aspect of me, my work that perhaps you haven't mentioned.
Well, of course, when I read this, I thought, well, I think she is missing the theater and she's compensating. That's why she is serving to all these Reiki organizations with their drama and their comedy.
And I also used to clown for the organization, for the gatherings quite often. And yeah, that's been real fun, really fun. I think one of my highlights with the Reiki Alliance was clowning for the conference on Silver Mountain, where I was able to do what I really love to do, which is clown without words, to perform without words. And people of all nationalities were falling in the aisles, I have to say.
I'm sure. And how unexpected, I really, it took me by surprise and I was thrilled. In fact, the Art Talk I'm releasing before we release this conversation will be about story and song, and it's with a storyteller in New Zealand and her husband, a musician,
Wonderful.
and it's right down your alley. You'll enjoy it, I'm sure.
It sounds like I will. Yes, I love story, and in my theatre company, it was all about story. The folk tales we performed in the form of stories rather than making them, dramatic plays. So they were like a great storytelling.
And I personally, but we are talking on a different matter, but making a bit of a bridge, I personally see culture at large, but art, theaters, visual artists. I see this actually as a very, very, very important contribution to society, and it is a service to our collective well-being and health. You see that similarly? You agree?
Definitely. Oh, absolutely. I think we need stories as human beings, and the arts are one of the ways that we share them and acknowledge the stories that we have in our lives as well. The painters are telling their story through their art, and of course theatre and so on is all based on story.
So, Kate, turning to service, I mean, reading your biography and talking to you and experiencing you're giving so much. You're, I'm driven by serving people. I have a strong desire to help. There is even a heading, serving the association. Why are you so passionate about serving? What's your take on service?
I think it's part of my spiritual practice. Phyllis introduced me to an article by a lady called Rachel Rahman some years ago, and that really kind of made me realize how my life has been about service, as you say. The article is about whether we fix, help, or serve when we're helping people who in our health professions. She wrote it particularly for doctors. But I find it applies to us doing Reiki as well. And I really saw that I had tried to fix things when I first started. And then I moved through into wanting to help. But that where my work really took off was when I understood that it's about service. That through me, something can be transformed when I'm in that attitude of service, if you like.
So you're suggesting there's a difference between helping people and serving people, and it is defined through my inner attitudes. If I'm helping, I am probably goal orientated. I have even an expectation on the outcome, whereas if I'm serving, I'm free of that. Is that fair?
Yeah, to some extent, yes. I mean, if you're a helper, then there's also a helpee, which makes it an unequal relationship as well. That's one of the things I think that's really important to me. Whereas if you're in service, both people are moving towards something better, some transformation, if you like. And I do also feel that in service, it's not me, but me in connection with something greater, which we obviously have with Reiki. We identify as Reiki or whatever else it might be that works through us. So it's kind of taking the meanness, the little me, out of the pictures a little, so that it's more expansive and actually introduces a much greater potential, because it's not limited by my thinking. It's what we can create together.
I hear you. It's of course potentially somewhat elitarian look on life, or it could be with ill intention. It could be interpreted that way, but I don't necessarily want to go there, or not yet in our conversation. And that, in fact, when if I ask you who would be a person who embodies service in that noble spirit which you just described, does anyone particular come to your mind? A personality everybody knows?
I would say Nelson Mandela would be one.
who's been inspired by, there you go.
Yeah, Gandhi.
And this is a beautiful quote. And it sort of, to me, says everything positive and noble about the idea of servicing as you embody it. The best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others.
Yes, that's lovely.
It is wonderful, and yet there's still the I in it.
Yes.
I'm finding myself.
Yes. And I think that's appropriate because we are part of the picture. It is I who serve. It is this body, it's this mind, as well as whatever I'm connecting to. And I think one of the things, one of my passions is actually about self-care as well. And in order to really serve, we also need to take care of ourselves and to understand ourselves as well as possible, and to be as conscious as we can in our actions and in our interactions with other people. So yeah, I'd agree with Gandhi that the best way to find yourself is through service, because it actually means you understand that you are not disconnected from everybody and everything around you, because in service you obviously need to be in some form of connection, even if it's when in service to ourselves, in taking care of ourselves. And, you know, there's a well-known saying about, if you want to pour out for other people, you need to be a filled jug yourself. If you want to pour.
Say it again slowly, if you want to.
If you say, you imagine I'm a jug of water and I want to pour out, fill your glass, I need to be filled. So I do think that it's not about ignoring ourselves or not taking care of ourselves. Actually, someone who is truly able to serve is truly also able to care for themselves. So the self does come into it.
Yeah, and I think the Greek word for I is ego, and in that context, the self is the ego. The I is not necessarily a representative for the ego in the sense of egotistical. I fix you. I know what you need. That kind of thing. Still, I want to stay for a moment with this less noble side of serving. And I mentioned it to you in our preliminary talk that I have very much an attitude like yourself towards service. And to me, serving humanity, in fact, serving the Reiki community with my work is a great privilege and a noble calling in my book. So I use the verb serve, to serve, very much in that sense. And I recently had a correspondence with a trainee of ours. In fact, she trains to become a Reiki teacher. And in the training, we reached a point where I was a little bit at loss why we were stuck together. And I gave her some ideas and some thoughts and some maybe recommendations. I can't remember, but I ended my communication with, how can I be of service to you? And I want to share with you the response that I received from her. That is a formulation I cannot accept. Give me advice, be helpful, yes, but you are not my servant. And that was an interesting experience because it made me think a little bit how she interpreted serving. And of course, if we're looking at the origin of the verb serve, we discover, or I discovered today, preparing myself, something rather interesting. From Latin, servire, be a servant, in service, enslaved. Figuratively, be devoted, governed by, comply with, conform, flatter. Originally, be a slave. So, of course, we have the upper crust, we have the church. It's a hot topic in Europe, in Switzerland, in Germany, with the church abusing their power. And of course, their definition of being in service to a ideology or to service to God often has been abused. So maybe it's not coincidental that the lady I was referring to was born in the eastern part of Germany.
Ah.
Exactly. So she doesn't have this highbrow attitude about serving as we have expressed so far. So how do you deal with that, Kate? Tell me a little bit. What's your take on that?
Well, I noticed that she said you could give her advice and you could tell her what to do, but not be her. Well, she said, yeah, give advice and be helpful, right? Be a helper or somebody who's going to fix what I want. But don't be my servant. So actually, she's bringing in those other two qualities and saying, you can do that and feel safe with that. But this other aspect of being in service, I feel uncomfortable with.
I don't agree with the former part, but with the latter part, I agree. And that's the one I want to zero in with.
Yes, yes.
Because looking at the origin of the word, I can see why people are saying, no. There is a dark side to, and let's face it, you and I are relatively privileged. Even within our own community, we belong to the senior people, and many of us respect us for that. We are privileged in many other ways. And there are many people out there who can't take that high-flying attitude of wanting to be at service to humanity because they're battling for survival.
When you're in that survival mode, it's difficult, but it isn't impossible. I mean, as I said, one of my inspirations was Nelson Mandela, and he was definitely in survival mode when he was in prison. And yet from that experience, he became somebody who completely understood service in the spiritual sense. So not in the sense of servant and master, although that was interestingly the context in which he learned about this, because it was about, the difference between the races. It was about servant and master. So, but from his experience of incarceration and that very, very difficult situation that he was in, he went through an awakening, and he surrendered, I would say, to what was happening. And that is what was the key to his becoming in service to humanity and the transformation that he went through. So, I mean, interestingly, the aristocrats in the aristocratic thing, that part of their philosophy is a duty of care, which is about, that they have a duty to look after those who serve. So in former days, not now so much perhaps, but certainly in former days, there was this kind of symbiotic relationship, so that those who were being served had a duty to care for those who were serving them, and vice versa. When it was working well, I guess they also cared about what they were there to do, which was in service.
Well, and substitute aristocracy with the word corporations, and it's an issue right now, right here.
Right.
So I'm with you there. Mm-hmm. I have prepared a small video, not yet on Nelson Mandela. I also got there, but let's have a look together.
Okay.
Really did see quite a lot of him. Even his knees. No, he won't speak into the microphone. and so to his poplar home, where we leave this bizarre little man, whose coming has caused so much comment, complete with loincloth, spinning wheel and goat's milk, feeling sure that he cannot complain of his reception or the publicity he has received, from which, by the way, we always understood that he shrank.
I heard you chuckle there when the commentator was speaking about his naked knees.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, actually, this was when Mahatma Gandhi for the first time went to the UK in 1931. And the naked knees, the loincloth, the spinning wheel, and the goat's milk all were mentioned.
Yes.
And were an issue. In fact, he was asked before he went on this trip, are you going to wear civilized clothing? And he said no. And of course, these things are an expression of civil disobedience. So to be at service is not only to comply with others. So there isn't just rendering service giving. There is sometimes also the need to take opposition. And you mentioned Nelson Mandela, and let me add this also.
Divisions in India, Gandhi became a symbol of truth and nonviolence throughout the world.
To all South Africans, today is a day like no other before it.
And since his death, others have used Gandhi's method of satyagraha to fight for peace.
So here we have Martin Luther King as well as Nelson Mandela, and there is this common thread of the civil disobedience. How disobedient are you? Where are you?
I can be quite disobedient as well. I think it's about being authentic, actually, authentic to a truth. And I think true service is about being authentic to our truth and a greater truth than our personal truth, actually. So I would say, I'm faithful, if you like, to a particular form of Reiki. And I'm quite happy to stand up for that, even if other people are disagreeing, and have done on many occasions. So I can be quite disruptive in some ways, and not just going along with the crowd, but
give me an example
in service. Well, we had a very interesting discussion in the Reiki Council recently about whether online initiation should be acceptable for professional practitioners. And I was very adamant that it was not appropriate. And it really, I think a lot of people were in agreement, but might have been swayed by the other argument if I hadn't stood up for my truth. And which I felt was not my personal truth, actually, but the truth of a certain community of Reiki. So, yeah, I don't, I don't have a problem with being disruptive, with differing in opinion, if it feels like it's in the greater sense of truth, in the way that Gandhi and Mandela and so on were speaking the truth of humanity, for humanity, about respect, and that every human being should be respected. And I'm totally with that.
I'm a little bit surprised and pleasantly surprised that you picked up that example of your disruptiveness, or your potential to be disruptive, in context with the absentee initiation. And isn't there, what are you going to do with people who have particularly in a inclusive organization where people agree to disagree. What are you going to do with people who say, well, and I belong to that group, there are certain parameters, clearly definable, exceptional parameters, and not for a Reiki seminar, but if a person is in dire needs and there are no apparent other solutions within a time constraint, then these absentee initiations have a justifications. So isn't your destructiveness, your strong truth, potentially borderline to being dogmatic?
No, because it's not about the distant or absent initiations per se. It's about those initiations in the context of professional practitioners. So in other words, people who are going to be giving Reiki to another person. We actually acknowledge the fact that, you know, the fact is these distant initiations happen. And I mean, I don't know, without knowing exactly the circumstances, how appropriate it would be. I personally wouldn't, I can't think of a situation that I would feel it was that desperate that distant Reiki couldn't be as helpful. But you know, I acknowledge that that's my opinion, and other people feel differently. And you know, but this was very much in the context of us giving a recognition to practitioners to set them out into the public domain, and that just didn't feel appropriate.
I see. I understand better now. I'm happy to give you examples where I believe that it would be a perfectly permissible and ethically sound. I'd be very willing, other occasion, to enter a discussion about how the parameters could be described within which such a helpful intervention could be acceptable. But let's get back to the topic of service. I'm glad we made this detour because it's
I have a question. Does it serve? Does it serve people to receive an initiation without a master present?
Well, what do you think my answer is?
Well, you obviously think it does. And I think we may have a difference of opinion there.
Really?
Yeah.
If it's a life-threatening situation with people dying,
why isn't a distant treatment enough?
A distant treatment is working fair enough for the duration while I treat and with consecutive effect. But the person on the spot may want to treat him or herself, or may want to do the self-treat, and hence the absentee initiation, in my opinion, has a justification. And in one of the most moving examples, it was actually an entire family, parents and 2 children, who had lost by suicide their brother. One of the parents had the 3rd child, and he committed suicide. And a Reiki practitioner was on the spot giving treatments, not even absentee treatment, but physical on-the-spot treatment, which I would, in situations like that, prefer over even absentee treatment. And the despair was such that this practitioner had to go back home, that they called us in Switzerland and my wife and me and asked if we could do absentee initiation. And we did. We had the woman on the spot support the recipients, the 4 people who got initiated. We gave them instructions. This was pre-internet connections and that kind of communication. and the woman then left after 2 or 3 days, and the family, the two parents happened to be doctors, by the way. They later came to and incidentally, they saw the effect when they went back to work, when they touched their patients. This just as a side comment. And they came about a month or so, or maybe 2 months later, they came, actually the whole family, to do a proper seminar. We explained to them this is only a temporary solution.
Right.
So very rudimentarily, I've described a situation where I think it would be quite, I can hardly imagine that anyone would object to that. Would you like to object?
Well, I'm just wondering whether it was fixing or helping, or was it really serving?
I'm not going to ask a question back, and I'm willing to answer that. I think the answer to that question is entirely and absolutely my own to answer.
Yes, I agree.
And I'm not responsible to give an answer to an organization, to my own Reiki teacher, not even to the law. If at all there is an authority, it would be my conscience, or if I had to believe in God, which I do, that would be the ultimate authority for me to answer that question to.
Yeah.
But the parameters, the person, the Reiki teacher, are going through, the considerations, they can be helpful to be discussed. And in fact, I believe that professional associations can be helpful by, for example, having a committee where people in doubt could call and say, I have this emergency, does it justify? And the committee might say, no, we have somebody on the spot right there. He could go by. There's no need. Or parameters to define as guidelines, as ethical guidelines, to answer the question, why are you doing it? Because that's basically what you ask me. Renee, did you do it in service? Or did you try and fix something?
Yeah.
And you know what my answer is?
Even or would you be we're trying to be helpful?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And you know what my answer is, even though I never said it to you, but it's obvious what my answer is.
Yeah.
And I'm happy at the end of the day when I knock at the pearly gate and the old man with the white beard comes out. I'm happy to look in his eyes, at least what concerns that situation. There are other situations in my life where I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I don't think I'm not asking that question about saying what's right or wrong. I just, it's not about did I do the right thing? It is about, as you said, the motivation and really looking at that and where am I coming from in making that choice? Is it from trying to sort something out for somebody else? Because sometimes I think service includes doing nothing.
Or doing the opposite.
Or doing the opposite of so in that situation, what would be the opposite?
In that situation, the opposite would be not only to do nothing, but to refuse. This is maybe a hypothetical conversation now revolving around absentee initiation. And I was actually referring to the topic of service because Gandhi went to England for a purpose. And he expressed that purpose by carrying his loincloth. And that's where the civil disobedience aspect comes. And like you said yourself earlier on in the conversation, even people who are less privileged in their own right, the mindset or the heart set, maybe more precisely, can still be in service.
Absolutely.
Are you ready to change the subject, or you still want to talk
Oh,
about?
no, I'm happy with the flow. That's fine.
We played to people. That's what we did. We didn't play to like those people or that people. You know what I mean? We just played to people.
That's so wonderful. I mean, Ringo Starr isn't Mahatma Gandhi or Nelson Mandela, but yeah, I agree with you.
He's quite an enlightened guy, even so.
Yeah, and every one of us, and to me, Ringo Starr now embodies the everyone. Okay, we're not the Beatles, so we don't have contracts to sign, multi-million contracts, but that attitude, that core attitude he expressed, we played to people, we didn't separate, right? That to me is very much, and he broke down, or rather the Beatles helped break down the barriers of segregation. I had no idea how influential they were until Whoopi Goldberg or this Dr. Kitty Oliver, the woman in the video, mentioned it, how they were a catalyst for major change.
Brilliant. Yes, I didn't know about that, but it doesn't surprise me.
And it's civil disobedience.
It is, yeah. It's something in service of a greater whole as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. You're stopping every time there's a red light?
I do, because to protect the safety of others.
Even when you're walking and there isn't a car in miles on the left and
crossing the road, that's different. If I'm in a car, I have the potential to kill somebody. If I'm walking, it's only me that's taking a risk. And if there's nothing around, if I can use my common sense and cross the road safely, I'll do that. Yeah. And I believe that, I mean, in the UK, it's not against the law to do that. I think in some countries, you might be breaking the law to do that. So
to jaywalk, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay, but what about the crossing in the car and you got somebody dying and who needs to get to the hospital real fast, and you're going through London Central and there is a red light?
Well, interestingly, I had a student who was in a desperate situation, was being led by a police car that went through a red light. She followed because she thought they must be some kind of thing that they'd organized, and her car was hit by another car, and she ended up with fractures that she hadn't, worse than she had even before. So I remember that as a cautionary tale, and I would be I'm not an ambulance driver. They can drive through red lights. I think I would have to stop and make sure it was safe. I might very slowly go through if it was really a desperate situation, but hopefully I'll never have to deal with that.
Yes, I hope it never does happen. But to me, that's a good example. To slow down, be cautious, and then make up your own mind and own decision. Basically, this train of thought, of course, tried to show that laws, rules, their arrangement for society to find their way and to protect each other, and they make sense, but they're not a brick wall, a prison, and a rigid, jaded natural law, a nature law. And I think, like in this example, slow down and make sure that nobody hits you from the behind, and that it's safe, that you're never, but then go, even if it's still red. At least that's what I would do, similarly like you.
Yeah, I think it's about what nourishes and preserves life, and as much as possible. And not just our own, but those around us as well, taking all of that into account.
Is that somewhat of a definition of service towards the end of our conversation?
In the interests of supporting all life, I guess. Yeah. It's not an easy thing to do because there are things that conflict. So we have to decide, what serves best, what is best in service of as many as possible. Or it's difficult, isn't it, sometimes? But if we really listen, as you say, to the natural laws and to what feels right in our heart and in our spirit, like apartheid definitely didn't feel right for a lot of people, and therefore civil disobedience was important and needed, but also violence was not good in the heart and the spirit, and so other ways were found that were more peaceful.
And I think that you picked up a key word. Civil disobedience is actually defined non-violent.
Yes.
That's what you just said. Very important point.
Yeah.
I went as a young man to South Africa. I could have known what apartheid is if I had listened or spoken to people. Never mind, there was no internet, but I could have. But the opportunity, the adventure, the professional challenge was such that I said I went. And I found out the injustice and the unbearable segregation was too much for me on the spot. And I quit my job at the earliest convenience against all the advice of my colleagues because it was career-wise the wrong move to make. But
sure.
My consciousness, and which I guess, and that's a question, Kate, is consciousness another word? No, conscience. Is that another word for what you just referred to, the language of the heart and the mind?
Yeah, I guess conscience. And I also think that the other word you use, consciousness, is also very apt because it's through becoming more conscious and more aware of our effect in the world and how we can contribute and, the ripples that go out from our actions and even just our being. The more conscious we can be about that, I think the more we can have a positive, helpful influence in the world and be of service.
And be of service. Wonderful closing of our conversation. Kate, is there a final comment, the words of wisdom you would like to add?
I don't think I have any words of wisdom.
I think you do.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm saying goodbye to you, Kate. Thank you for having joined me. Dear viewers, thank you for having watched. I wish you a wonderful day, evening, wherever you are. I hope you watch us again in 3 weeks' time. Please subscribe and bye-bye.